Okay, one activity that I like, it's actually a kind of a generic type of activity that can be adapted in a lot of different ways, and that's a mingle activity. And what's great about a mingle activity, mingling of course is like what you do at a party. You go and talk to different people, maybe someone who's your friend, someone you don't know, and talk to as many different people as you can. This is a great activity for the classroom, because it gives the students lots of opportunities to practice the same thing. And there's lots of different types of mingles. There's the classic icebreaker, like find someone who, where they try to find someone who meets some kind of characteristic. It can be a role play. You could do a role play mingle that's simulating like a wedding party or something, and everyone has a different role. Maybe one student is the brother of the bride, and another student is some other relative, and they can have other characteristics they have to play out, and talk to as many people, and have those different opportunities to practice the same language, but it's unique every time. So it's more interesting than if they just practice the same grammar form or whatever the target language is. If they do the same thing over and over with the same partner, that gets boring after a while. But if they are doing it with a different partner every time, maybe the first time they're not very confident, but then the second time they feel a little better about it. The third time they're used to it. The fourth time it's no problem, and so they can just do that over and over. So yeah, it's a great activity, I think.
All right. The favorite activity that I have, I'm going to tell you one that I really like in the area of reading. It's called a jigsaw reading. And for those of you who don't know what a jigsaw reading is, I'll tell it quite simply. You find a topic, let's say what to do in a thunderstorm. So your overall underlying theme is safety. But we want to get specific and talk about what to do in a thunderstorm. So for a reading jigsaw, you would find a minimum of 2 articles on the same topic, usually from different sources. But the articles should be of about equal length. The word count should be very closely matched, so that one reading is not substantially longer than the other. So the students read, they're assigned which article to read, either article A or B, and they read their article, and they see a list of prepared questions. The questions were made based on the readings. Some of the questions are answered in reading A. Other questions can only be answered from reading B. However, what makes it a unique activity is that some of the questions can be answered by both articles. So, after students have read their own article, answered as many questions as possible, they get together with one another and start going down the list of questions, starting from the top. And they talk back and forth until, at the end, all of the questions are completely answered. The reason that I like this is that students really have fun. It's an interactive thing. There's a portion of it where, yes, you are alone on your own, silent reading, deriving information from the text, and the questions, of course, check your comprehension. So it's very good in that regard. Intermediate students and beginning students can also do reading jigsaws. You just have to make sure that the articles you choose are at the appropriate level, and the questions that you write are at the appropriate level.
Recently we created an interactive whiteboard activity. We took a brochure from OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and we broke it down. It was a PDF originally, and we used it. It's in the public domain, of course, so we could break it down, and we created an activity where the students are supposed to identify the symptoms of heat-related illnesses, heat exhaustion, heat stroke, and they put them into different categories. But they're working as a group. They're working as a class to complete the activity. It's really engaging. It deals with risk management and safety, which is really vital for the military. But not just in the military, but outside of military time, outside the classroom, just walking out the door is a risk. So risk management covers all facets of personal and military life. But for those who don't have access to technology, to interactive whiteboard technology, you could actually print out the pamphlet and you could cut it up into pieces because there's pictures involved. There are pictures that describe the symptoms. If you're feeling fatigued because you've been out in the sun too long working, this is something the students can describe for each other. Again, different symptoms of just being affected by heat illness.
The activity I'm going to talk about addresses all 4 skills. It meets an objective that is rather difficult, and that is namely to write a paraphrase of a text that the student has read. And I like it because it includes interesting information, gets the students up out of their seats and talking to each other, gives them the opportunity to practice, and finally focuses on the task at hand, which is to write a paraphrase. The idea for the activity came from a text I just happened to be reading. The source was Diane Larson Freeman's Teaching Language from Grammar to Grammaring. She proposed that repetition offers benefits and described a speaking activity in which students conducted the same dialogue with 3 different interlocutors. Larson Freeman established that repetition promoted improved syntactic control. Following up on her idea, we created a 4-skill activity that covered reading, listening, speaking, and writing. We required that students read a text 3 times, that they repeated it to 3 different classmates, and finally they wrote a paraphrase of the text. Students were provided with a 100-word text. We limited it because of the challenge of dealing with remembering what you were going to write. And we printed it on an index card, and on the reverse side of each card we printed keywords and phrases from the text. We found that the activity was fun and students were very enthusiastic. We also found that a student's delivery improved with each retelling of the text. In addition, we discovered triple retelling made the writing text, paraphrasing, easier. Syntactic control of sentence structure improved, and writing was considerably faster and more successful.
Okay, so I had to go back and look at the CBT, and there's one in particular that I really like from Level 6. It's, if you want to go look at it, it's Book 33, Unit 1, Activity 2. So Book 33, the topic is language and communication, and Lesson 3 of that is receiving messages, so how we absorb messages from out there. It's a 4-part series, and I'll just read you the titles and talk a little bit about each one. So the first part of the activity is called Thinking About Communication. This was basically an icebreaker. We wanted to focus the students' attention on this topic. We showed them a Chinese symbol for the verb to listen. It has a little caption and a few keywords. And based on that, we asked them 3 inferential questions. The answers weren't obvious from what was there. They had to connect the dots, so we got them thinking. The second part is entitled Listening to Tips About Good Communication. This is an audio close activity. It's got audio, text, and some words that have to be dragged into blanks, but it's really the meat of the presentation. It's got 5 paragraphs with detail, and they describe 5 key elements for effective listening. And so here the students get a little bit more than what they got in the textbook. The third part, recognizing tips for good communication. These are dramatizations. They're interpersonal interactions where these 5 key elements are either used or not used. And what we asked the students to do there was to identify which elements were used or not, and the positive/negative consequences of that. These video scenarios also allowed us to bring in nonverbal communication, which was another topic that's treated in the book, and we also treated it in another set of activities. So it's kind of like a nice melding. And finally, part 4, categorizing communication statements. This is a sorting activity where the students hear an audio statement about an interaction and they have to evaluate whether that represents good or poor communication based on what they've done previously. This was probably the most challenging thing because we're using a higher cognitive skill with evaluation, and it's basically asking them demonstrate what you've learned. Show us if you know the difference. So I think this sequence was really nice. I'm pretty satisfied every time I've looked at it. It's gotten good feedback during validation, and basically we took them through that logical progression I talked about earlier. And we achieved 3 of the language objectives to boot.